This is Brian Canini on FANZine Live, and today I'm gonna talk about Airbag number 0. 0 issues are strange things to begin with. I did issue 0 because technically this is a collection of mini comics. So 4 mini comics to be exact. When I started messing around with the idea of short stories and anthologies, I started with a mini comic. Actually, it started with a 3-page web comic that I wanted to see in print, and you can't make a mini comic with just 3 pages. So that led me to think of other things that I wanted to see in print, and one thing led to another, and I came out with 2 stories first. I kept the titles very generic because I was not intending on actually making any sort of one-man anthology thing, but the short stories kept coming, and before I know it, I had come out with 4, and by that point it seemed kind of ridiculous to keep the whole stories thing going. All of them have very generic titles. It's 4 stories, 3 stories, 2 more stories, and with each mini comic, the name is basically how many stories are in each of it. And a fun little visual pun that I did with the mini comics is each of the covers are actually the number of stories on the building are the number of stories that are actually in the comic. And to stay true with that, on this cover we have a 13-story building because there are 13 stories in this one. But yeah, this is basically a collection of all the mini comic series that led me to Airbag, which is why it's in issue 0. All these comics were created before I started Airbag, and they kind of led me down the trail of doing short stories and figuring out how stories can kind of play off each other, form a dialogue between themselves to kind of make a cohesive package. A special thanks goes out to obviously my wife, Amy Canini, who I couldn't do anything without, but also Ryan Carey, who's a reviewer. He's been reviewing my stuff for a long time, and his reviews on these story minis were kind of what made me start thinking about how stories can kind of work off each other and make a more cohesive whole when you read them together. Stories, the first story in this is called a story called Hand City. It's pretty simple. It's basically a guy wakes up and discovers a tiny city growing on his hand. It's very much in the realm of the Simpsons episode where Lisa starts to grow a civilization off of a tooth in a bowl and Diet Coke or something like that. But the way this story is kind of structured, it can be read 2 ways, which is what I try to do with a lot of my stories. The first way is the obvious way of it's a sci-fi story. The hand grows out of control and eventually, takes him over. But the other way that I find more interesting is it's kind of a meditation on ideas and creativity and art, and how if you don't actually put them into practice, it can kind of whittle away at your life and make you miserable. And then kind of going in tandem with that, the next story is Baggage, which I did a number of years ago for a webcomic. It's basically a story about a cartoonist who's wandering around the airport with luggage, kind of thinking about his life and comics and what it actually means to be a cartoonist, and if he came at it too late or if he took a misstep somewhere. It's very contemplative, and then kind of ends on a joke, and that's kind of encompasses the first mini comic, which was 2 stories. Then we go in directly into 4 stories, which starts with essentially an evolution comic strip. We've got the fish who grows an arm and then another arm and eventually crawls up on land, only to be greeted with an unseen adult figure telling him to get a job. It's just a quick one page. And that's followed by University Dining, which admittedly it didn't turn out how I had hoped as far as the message. It's misinterpreted a lot, but the idea was to make it a satirical jab at the costs of going to college and equating that or comparing it to the costs of eating out. This couple is going to a restaurant for dinner. Parking costs money, so they don't want to pay for parking because that's ridiculous since they're paying for a meal, so they have to go and find a parking spot far away. And then when they finally get to the place, they're met with a host who's basically telling them that they have to purchase dinner menus, very much like how one has to purchase books when they go take a college class that they're already paying for. And then he goes on and tells them they have to pay for utensils and other stuff. And by the time they actually sit down, they're already out like $150. The waiter comes and tells them about the specials that aren't even on the menu that they end up getting. And the whole time the couple's trying to take it in stride, and eventually their food comes late and it's the wrong thing they ordered, and the waiter basically tells them that this is going to be better for them. So it's just kind of a whole big jab at college. It didn't turn out as well as I hoped, but it's still here because this is, with comics, everything is a growing process. The more stories you tell, the better at it you're going to get. It's followed by Hollywood Tears, and the 4 stories kind of take on a cycle of life, essentially. So you start off with your childhood, then you go to college, and then this one's outside of college. It's a story, a quick 2-pager about a woman who's moved to Hollywood to make her dreams come true, and it's written as a letter to her mother. And this is one of those stories that I wrote to kind of do what comics do best, which is have words and images play off each other. So all the stuff she's telling her mom is not necessarily true, and then the image kind of paints the whole picture. The perfect example would be a producer even offered me a part recently, and he's not actually offering her a part as much as he's offering her something else. And she goes on to say, but the script wasn't right for me, so I turned it down. And then she pepper sprays him. And then the last story is about aging. It's another 1-pager. And that kind of does it for the 4 stories. The 3 stories actually starts with the story that started me down this path, which was this asinine memory from when I was in middle school that, for whatever reason, my brain held on to. It's really stupid memory. But the wonderful thing about it is that once I made a comic and shared the memory with the world so that the memory could go into other people's brains, I no longer think about it. So, ha 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 ha. Let's talk about Elephants is really just a relationship story. Elephant being the elephant in the room that you don't want to talk about. It's basically a couple going through troubles because one of them is cheating on the other one. The heroine of Snack Foods is about Pringles, and it takes it to its inevitable conclusion. And then last but not least was I did 2 more stories. That was the last of the mini-series, and this one actually, I think, it came together as a whole in a nice cohesive package. Both stories are kind of contemplative and work really well off each other. The first one's Empty Rivers. It's about a guy who's going to his mother's funeral, just kind of trying to figure out the meaning of all this. He starts thinking about an old girlfriend, just thinking about his life and wondering if it's all worthwhile. And then he ends up that he's working at a just kind of crappy retail job that's mind-numbing, and that is his life, and he has to deal with it and figure out what he wants to actually do with it. And this is actually based off of, I used to work in a camera store back when there was film cameras, so I know this life and these questions very well as far as what a customer asks when they go to buy a camera. And the last story is And Life is Brief, which is a very personal story about a mother who's on her way with her kids to the hospital to try and meet up with their estranged grandmother. Just kind of giving the kids explaining to kids what happened. Kids have all these questions as to why they never knew this person and why the person would want to even see them at this point since they're on their deathbed. I don't remember why now, but for whatever reason I wanted to set it in the future, and so I've got this little futuristic floating car that this whole conversation happens in, which was a lot of fun to draw. I can rarely say that about cars. And then with every issue of Airbag, I have a letters column, and Noah Van Sciver's solo anthology Blammo was a big inspiration for this, for Airbag in general. I used to do drink and draws with Noah when he lived here in Columbus. He once asked me what I wanted when I was going to make a graphic novel, and my answer to him was that my goal was to make a anthology series like Blammo. And so here's a, I guess, special bit of trivia for you. Actually, pay homage to Noah and all the issues of Airbag. I sneak his Noah character in the background somewhere as a kind of little Alfred Hitchcock deal. So see if you can spot him. And then I also try to do recommended reads because I read a lot of cool comics, and we live in a time where there are just so many phenomenal comics being produced in the small press and indie world. And I always try and do some sort of closing thought which just kind of wraps up the whole issue. But I guess in general, Airbag, I try and keep all of them kind of self-contained, one cohesive whole. And I always try and do a comic on the back that's in color. And this is the history of comics, fairly accurate as far as what happened with comics. But that's Airbag number 0, Grand Tour. It's available on my website at briancanini.com, or you can pick it up at a number of stores around the country, including the Laughing Ogre here in Columbus, Partners and Son in Philly, Gutter Pop Comics in Buffalo, a number of other places that are slipping my mind. But yeah, thank you for having me and letting me walk you through this.